Good morning. Welcome to our hangout. I am Francois Bardenast. I'm the deputy editor for UKBF and Business Zone. We also run The Pitch, which is the biggest small business competition in the United Kingdom. It was founded in 2008, and the purpose of the event is to help small businesses to educate, empower, and enable entrepreneurs to succeed. The event this year is sponsored by E.ON, and I'm now also joined by Todd Perry from E.ON. Hi, Todd. How's it going?
Good morning. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Todd, could you just, for our viewers, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Todd Perry. I work at E.ON. I'm currently head of SME sales, so responsible for all of our direct sales to small and medium businesses. By way of a bit of background before that, I ran meter operations in the UK and then helped E.ON set up their corporate venture capital fund in Germany. And before that, I was an entrepreneur myself, but I'm sure we'll get into a bit of that later on.
Yes, I'm sure we will. Actually, that kind of leads very nicely into our first question, really. I mean, you referenced there that you had a bit of a previous life before E.ON as an entrepreneur yourself. In your own experience of running these businesses and starting up your businesses, can you talk through a little bit what you see in the current market as being the biggest challenges for startups and entrepreneurs at the moment?
Okay. So yeah, there's kind of two questions there, because when I was starting my companies, it was a long time ago, and I'm sure the current challenges have changed at the time, or between the times. So to tackle the first question, I started two companies, one during graduate school and one after graduate school. One was a pulmonary drug delivery company built off of intellectual property from Harvard and MIT. And basically, it was a course on how to start a company with a multidisciplinary student body. And we came together, we developed a business plan, we did some proof of concept experimentation, and we kind of turned it into an investable entity, which then went off and has become, it has taken a lot longer, I think, than anyone would have liked, but it's currently a publicly traded company and doing quite well. The second company was built on kind of my PhD research, and it was a low energy water treatment company where we tried to use microorganisms to desalinate water as a pre-treatment for drinkable water, and solving all the world's problems in one canister was the promise. And we had, again, a really great team, put together the initial business plan, did some proof of concept experimentation, won some business plan competitions, and it was going really well. And I think there were several challenges at the time, but it was before venture was ready to invest in energy-related infrastructure type investments, and we had team dynamic issues and all of these things. So challenges there, and eventually that one had to go by the wayside. But I think so that the challenges that I've faced as an entrepreneur are very different in those two examples. And the first one, I had the backing of experienced founders and people who had, venture capitalists in their speed dial list and had easy access to funding, and that created a long runway of opportunity for us. And the second one, we had a great team, we had a great concept, but it was a relatively unproven market and a very hesitant investment community, and that really put some challenges in front of us in terms of having to really diligence it a lot further before anyone would consider investing in it. So I guess leading to the challenges of today's market, I think many of those challenges still exist. So for entrepreneurs, kind of at any stage of company, it's really about how far can you get commercially before you need to bring on partners, and what are the quality of those partners. For a long time, Silicon Valley and everyone was, or for the last couple of years anyways, everyone has been investing in energy, and it's been viewed as very hot. But I think more recently, the ability to exit those companies has dried up a bit. And so a lot of the traditional investors are moving back towards much more capitally efficient investments, which may be great for many of them folks who are at the pitch. If you're not in energy, if you're in a software related or a services related, that's great, because that's ventures bread and butter. But for energy related companies, I think there is a challenge with funding. I think whatever market you're in, the other challenge is finding the right backer who will actually help your business as opposed to hinder it. So.
Yeah, and it's also just kind of slightly leading on to that question. I mean, you referenced that a lot of the excuse me, the startups that you did had new technologies and new ideas behind them. I mean, how did you kind of find that process of trying to essentially explain that to people who might not really understand what it is that you're doing? Was that difficult for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'll have to think back a bit. It was a while ago. So for the I'll focus on the water treatment one, because that one was a bit more recent, although quite a while ago. Yeah, it was very hard. I mean, we had to go into venture capitalists who were used to investing $500 to $2 million, in an early stage company, and that would basically go to staff or small IT type investments to get a company off the ground. And I forget what the number we were asking for, but it was much, much larger, because we were trying to pitch essentially an infrastructure type investment that would eventually be acquired by something like GE. And so it was a very different ask that we were going after. And the technical side, actually, I think most venture capitalists they want to understand the technical side, but only enough so that they can ask the right questions that you might not have thought about, like how do the economics scale on an application or a technology like you're talking about, or in drug delivery, or how are you going to scale up manufacturing, and have you looked at outsourcing to other countries? So they will bring a perspective that you probably haven't thought of as an entrepreneur. So the questions are difficult, but they're not difficult like they're coming right down the highway that you would expect in terms of technical diligence and whatnot. It's much more the intersecting business questions that you probably haven't thought of. So that's why I would always say, when you get invited to go and pitch to an investor, you don't go and do your favorite university application or your favorite university interview, the first one out of the gate. You go and do a couple warm-ups before you go to your Oxbridge interview, because you want to make sure you've practiced before you get to that one, because I guarantee you'll always get a question that you weren't expecting.
We've kind of now covered the kind of challenges that you faced, and I mean, but now kind of looking back, and also perhaps also speaking to entrepreneurs now, what are the three critical lessons that you think that entrepreneurs need to kind of learn from your own experience and from what you've kind of seen in your work at E.ON?
Yeah. So, and I think this is true at any stage of company. But investors will tell you this right out of the gate. The most critical part is your team. The quality of your team, the depth of your team, how that team works together, because it is, almost, I would say, no entrepreneur's first product is actually what goes to the marketplace, right? It has to be iterated on. It has to take the customer's insights and bring it in and adapt it to their needs, refine it, improve the cost to produce it, whatever it is. But you know, the inventors often have, you know, they think that they've boiled the ocean and solved the world's problems, when in fact they might have done a good job of that, but it's really about how you get it to market that is the critical part, and you need a deep bench of skills to do that. So the critical part, whether you're in a 3-person, you know, startup in a garage, or in a medium-sized company, or even a big, it starts and ends with the quality of the team and what they're ready to do, you know, for the mission of the company and for the satisfaction of the customers. I think that the second part of that, building on that, is understanding, you know, being able to admit when you don't have the skills, and bringing in the supporting skills that, you know, really help that out. And it's particularly important in when you're looking at venture investment or outside investors. There's a lot of money out there. It's always hard, you know, hard to get money. But once you reach a certain stage in your career or whatnot, you know, it is relatively possible to raise kind of friends and family rounds or even venture rounds. But the thing is that you've got to have a compelling product, and you've got to bring on investors that add something. Because the worst thing you can do is put somebody on your board or in a position of control in your company, and they are not aligned and they can't help you through, you know, the next step of adversity that you haven't even considered yet. So, you know, I don't know if it's somebody who has franchising experience, if you want to build a franchise business model, or, you know, somebody with global supply chain management experience if you're looking at building a widget. But we've got to know when to go out and get those skills. Yeah, and then the third lesson, and it does relate to kind of my current day job, is, you know, customer is king. The customer dictates everything, and you can think that you've got the greatest widget out there, but ultimately at the end of the day, the customer's not buying it for whatever reason. It's priced too high, it doesn't appeal to their aesthetic senses, or whatever it is, you know, you're dead before you even start. So critical part is, you know, getting out to market early, interacting with your customers, getting their feedback in, and you know, continuing to be as close to the customer as possible, whether it's B2B or B2C.
I suppose, you know, if you're involved in a startup, you know, it's easy to feel such a strong sense of ownership of the idea, because I mean, you were there from conception to actually maybe even to the point where it's like a MVP. And, you know, it's kind of like, it sounds like what you're saying is like it's very easy to lose that perspective and kind of just start like develop this kind of fortress mentality of, oh, other people are wrong, they just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that. It could be that you are a naturally technical person, and so your safe zone is to be tinkering and being technical, as opposed to, you know, being out talking to customers. You know, there can be a variety of reasons why you turn inward rather than outward. But the more customer interactions you have, the better product you will develop, product or service. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the more revenue you can bring in before you have to talk to somebody about outside capital for scaling and whatnot, the more control you'll have going into it. So, you know, it's kind of a win-win to get out there and talk early. And I think a lot of inventors, founders, feel the need to be very protective of their ideas. And, you know, I think that world is dead. People, you know, people have great ideas, but if you go to Silicon Valley or any other kind of vibrant innovation ecosystem now. It's a very open, it's almost the service model, Airbnb, everybody shares everything and everybody benefits. Of course, you need intellectual property protection, but it doesn't do you any good to keep tinkering in the garage as opposed to going out and trying it out.
Yeah, it's like I guess it's like the old saying, if you love something, set it free, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, so Todd, you briefly alluded to your role at E.ON now as head of SME sales. You know, could you give us a little bit more insight into what it is that role entails on like a day-to-day basis, and and what you do more widely across the business?
Sure. Well, yesterday involved giving out cakes, which was a nice day. I wish every day was like that. But we had some floor talks across my two operations. So essentially, I'm a people manager now, and I have two call centers, one in the Nottingham area and one in South Yorkshire, and each one of them is doing a mixture of activities, essentially direct customer contact over the phone, a little bit of a field interaction, but our job is to drive acquisitions and retentions and interact with our 500,000 SME customers on a yearly basis and try to get them to stay with E.ON. So priorities for us are, having a great customer experience, solving whatever issues there are, having a good value proposition that the customer values, and ultimately at the end of the day, signing you up as an E.ON customer. So those are kind of the big buckets of priorities, and the day-to-day job though is essentially managing people, and it's a long journey from kind of my entrepreneurial days where it was tinkering and whatnot, or even the venture investing days where it's a lot thinking about strategy and whatnot. This is about helping people be really good at what they're doing on a day-to-day job, and I think depending on what kind of businesses are presenting at the pitch, you shouldn't lose sight of that, because whatever stage of a company you're in, going back to one of the earlier questions, you're only as good as your people. And if you are doing direct sales or even B2B sales, you've got to have staff out there that you trust, that are empowered, that feel that they can be innovative and try to push the boundaries of what we can do and feedback the customer's suggestions. So I try to, it's more challenging in a large scale operation, but we try to instill processes, but also a culture where we are all in it together. We are all responsible individually and collectively for the success of this business, and we've seen some great improvements in our productivity and our efficacy, through those interventions. I had a great boss, and he said, eventually at some point when you manage enough people, you realize that you don't work for your boss anymore. You work for the people that work for you. And so, that's kind of where I try to spend most of my time.
And it's quite interesting what you mentioned there, because obviously E.ON's operation is now very, very large scale, but it's also something that it's a bit of a dilemma that a startup might face, especially as it starts growing, is this kind of trying to manage the synthesis between like having processes for dealing with customers, and also making sure that they retains a culture of individual responsibility. Is how do you manage that balance? I mean, as a people manager yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean it's a critical question. I remember, I won't name the startup, but I was in a startup's office with the CEO and the president. And this company is one of the most successful energy startups out there, and it went public and all of these things. And I saw that tension because one of the guys who worked in tried to pass the CEO a contract, and they had clearly just implemented a process where it needed to go through sign-off before it got the CEO's signature. And yeah, that company was struggling with that tension right now. I think it's a different challenge when you're on a growth trajectory than when you are in a stable organization like we are. But you know, I wish I had something more sophisticated. But I think, you know, the way I go about it is I need to know enough to know what's going on. I need to know enough by which I can tell if we are, you know, ahead of target, behind target, and what are the different levers I can pull to influence that trajectory. But the rest of it, I'm very clear with my management team, and I think they are with their teams. You know, I trust you. I want you to get the job done. And if you come across something great, I need you to feed it back up so we can all benefit from it. So we do a lot of work around performance boards and having daily dialogues and sharing lessons. We do a lot of work with coaching and sharing best practices. And we try to keep the dialogue fresh and vibrant and daily. And then, you know, that feeds into both kind of management information and numbers that get fed up to me, but also qualitative stuff on good things that are going on in this part of the operation that we can bring over to other parts.
Would you say that that's the favorite part of your job for you? That kind of maintaining that malleable kind of framework where people can be, you know, essentially facilitating people's innovation and their brilliance, so to say.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a great part of it. It's I mean, I have a very full calendar, as you can imagine. But part of the most exciting bits are when something comes in that I wasn't expecting, right? Because there's either something great or something that needs some real attention to fix. And so yeah, it is those you know, daily opportunities where something comes across your desk that you weren't expecting, where you can do you know, something different and you can make a difference. I do think, going back to your question before, you know, there is also a there is a feeling of fulfillment, and that's, you know, mine, but also my whole operation. Over the last several months, we've seen it takes a long time to move, you know, this many people on a journey, and there is a tremendous amount of satisfaction when you can slowly see the business improving in the direction you need it to go. And so it's about getting the tanker turned in the right direction, and that takes a while, and then making those little corrections that keep it on course. And you know, it's the balance of those priorities that are great. So you get to, you know, go into management meetings and talk about big strategic plans that are coming. You then get on calls and do call listening, and you're talking to customers, and we come and do something like this. And so it's just, you know, every day is different. And I'm sure your entrepreneurs will understand that.
I mean, it sounds like you've actually applied quite a lot from your early days as an entrepreneur and a founder. I mean, what are some of the other lessons you've also kind of tried to inject into a larger scale at E.ON?
Well, back in my venture investing days, when I helped start the venture fund, you know, my focus was very much on the customer. So we can talk about the technical side of why we set up the venture fund and why it was the right mechanism, et cetera, et cetera. But when I came to E.ON, it was very much focused on large scale generation and you know, kind of old world power. And you know, I was of the belief, I didn't say it too loudly, but I was of the belief that in time, no one would want to talk to us about our power generation assets. They were responsible for 99% of our global revenue, sorry, that number is probably a bit of an exaggeration, a large percent of our global revenue, but the asset was the customer. So I very much focused on the customer, and we've talked about that several times already today, and that has just carried through. So we made some great investments when I was in the venture world that have led to kind of the digital engagement strategy for E.ON UK, and it's now being rolled out E.ON globally. And we've got some great partners there, and we did make the investments very much as partners as opposed to just a straight investor. Going back to the conversation before, we wanted to provide commercial de-risking to these companies that we believed in. That was our asset back to them, and in exchange, we expect them to grow our investment accordingly. But since then, in my 2 roles in the UK, it's been very much about the customer interaction, the quality of that conversation. You can measure it in Net Promoter Score or other things, but it's about, when I was in field, for example, you can call into an E.ON call center, any energy provider's call center, and that could be your customer experience. But when somebody in a uniform knocks on your door to change your meter, that person becomes the face of E.ON. And we talked a lot about how, we were in that person's home or business for an hour to change the meter. That was a chance to either disappoint them or delight them. And we really tried to move to the latter. And frankly, the men and women out in the field do a great job. And now, we try to do it on the phone as well, in terms of the quality of conversation, understanding the customer's needs, and trying to adapt what we are pitching to them appropriately.
And kind of continuing onto your work at E.ON, one of the big messages that E.ON is trying to communicate at the moment is how energy, excuse me, how energy efficiency boosts profitability within a small business specifically, beyond this kind of simplistic understanding of, it just reduces my energy bill. Could you perhaps just elaborate a little bit on that, and what do you see as the profitability gains through energy efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take a step back and kind of provide the E.ON overview, and then I'll talk a bit in particular for SMEs. So E.ON is moving on a journey from being an energy provider to being a solutions provider, of which energy is one of those solutions, right? The actual power and gas is one of those solutions. So there's been a lot of work going on to look at all of the different technologies that are available for large-scale customers, medium-scale customers, small, residential, and trying to figure out which are the right ones for us to play in, and which ones our customers will best be interested in. And that's, frankly, still a work in progress. So I'm sure there will be more coming later on. And like we said before, we may not get it right straight out of the gate, but it's about moving into a new field and a new place. So what we're looking at there are a variety of different options, including combined heat and power plants. We've got lighting offerings. We've got electric vehicle charging stations, and we've got a variety of other technology, small building energy management systems, all kind of disparate technologies that we see an opportunity in the marketplace. Where I think the real opportunity comes, though, for businesses is, especially later stage businesses, larger stage businesses, is that you have an asset there that you can, so this is kind of the utopian world, but the entire energy system is built on generating from large-scale power generation and transmitting it to the end customer and charging for that service. But businesses, be it small-scale manufacturing, farming, even data center type businesses, or could be a convenience store. I'm excited to see the different businesses at the pitch, so I'm trying to be all inclusive. But all of those have different energy needs, different energy profiles that currently have been working, or up until now have been working, kind of independently. And the real opportunity for businesses is to aggregate those energy loads up, those demands up, but also the potential on-site generation options, and disconnect yourself as much as possible from the power grid, because then you can essentially become your own power plant. We call it the virtual power plant. But if you've got on-site, let's say you're a small-scale manufacturer of a widget, if you have the space to have combined heat and power on site, have some solar panels on your roof, and you install a smart energy management system in your manufacturing and your business, all of a sudden, by controlling when you turn things on and off, you can have your maximum demand, which reduces your peak energy charges. You can sell energy back to the grid, which obviously has financial benefit, and you can control your asset a lot better than everything goes on when it wants to go on, and I have to pay for it when it does. So that's kind of that's the end game. Is that I would be delighted if every one of your businesses was incredibly successful, and E.ON was able along their journey to provide them the products and services and energy solutions that they need to be successful along that journey. I think there's a softer aspect to it as well. I get to travel a lot around this beautiful country, meeting with customers and things like that, and I stay in a lot of hotels, unfortunately. But I've seen, even just in the last 2 years, you go up and down the motorway anywhere, e-vehicle charging stations are popping up everywhere. You go to hotels now, e-vehicle charging stations are being put out front, and why they were previously never used, now you see people plugged into them. And I expect that when companies are growing, they will have choices to make. They'll have choices about what office complex they go to. They'll have choices about how they use energy in the office, and their employees will value those choices accordingly. And so I think there is an inflection point where companies can do simple things like installing mini building energy management systems to make sure that the lights go off every night after the last person leaves. That can save the money. That can save the company money. But at the same time, if you've got a staff of 10 people and 3 of them have an e-vehicle, and you don't work in an office complex that doesn't have a charging station, you can see how it will very quickly turn into kind of employee benefits that the companies can provide to their staff, and that will affect your ability to get talent. And it's very soft, it's very squishy, it's very hard to quantify, but I do think we are, as a community, moving on a journey where it's going to matter more and more.
I suppose it's also about moving from this kind of thing where we just see energy as a means to an end, this kind of thing that just magically kind of turns on the light bulb, to actually being a very, very real facet of you kind of running your business on a day-to-day kind of basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I've seen it. So I've had the great privilege of, in a previous role, consulting to other countries on their energy demands. And if you go to Brazil, for example, it is not a given that you will always have energy on while you're running your business. And so you kind of have to come up with on-site generation options or redundancies especially if you've got kind of business critical things going on. And it just we live in a very privileged energy regime where the power basically never goes off. But the opportunity is then to now, because the costs are coming down so dramatically, to make the choice to be in control of the own power, so you can decide how and when it goes off, as opposed to somebody else deciding or nobody deciding, and all of your energy demands going through the roof at the same time.
It's actually a very interesting point. It's almost kind of like importing like a lesson from other markets, because I mean where I'm from in South Africa also, it's very common to kind of experience blackouts or what they refer to as load shedding.
Yeah.
So it's it's kind of using that kind of privilege and the luxury of always having energy or electricity that's always there, and perhaps just being slightly more progressive with what you do with that privilege.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, that load shedding, that it hasn't really come to the UK, but in US markets, they absolutely have demand response programs where you can get essentially paid for not turning all your air conditioners on at the same time, because there's just not enough electricity to power all of that. And so, I think the UK is a bit, it's on the beginning of its journey. The government's doing a great job supporting the smart rollout, and that's absolutely the right thing to do for the industry and for the customers. But that's only the beginning, because once you have the visibility of energy use, you can really do a lot more powerful things with it.
And now, just you'll be one of the judges at the pitch, Todd, this year. What are some of the things you'll be looking for in terms of actually utilizing to judge whether a business is worthy of the much coveted prize of the pitch winner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it's themes that we've talked about before already, and shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But for me, it begins with the team and the quality of team and the honest self-reflection of the team. If they don't have all the skills, an understanding of what skills they need and where they might get them. I think the more customer interaction and the more commercial proof points and validation, that will help kind of de-risk the opportunity. And then frankly, I've been in operations for a long time, and I haven't been looking at early stage businesses, and so I'm looking for something that's kind of exciting and new, and that I haven't heard of before. And I'd love to be just kind of wowed by a really creative and interesting idea.
Well, I can tell you that I was involved in the judging process, and there were quite a few like slightly like very, very interesting ideas. So I don't think you'll be wanting for like slightly there's a few off the wall ones as well, which is quite cool always. And then there's a few ones that are just really good ideas. But yeah, we'll certainly be looking forward to it. And I think that's pretty much everything we had to cover today, Todd, and everything I wanted to ask. Thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to having you on board for the pitch this year.
Great, thank you. I really enjoyed this chat, and I will see you in November.
Yeah, see you there. And
beautiful.
If anyone's watching this that's going to be in the pitch, will come say hi to me and Todd. We'll be there in force. Thank you very much, guys, and have a good day.